Hey guys, my name is Jaylen Boone. I'm the 8th UNAUSA Youth Observer to the UN, and you are tuned in to the Youth in Action series. On today's episode of Youth in Action, I got the chance to sit down with Rana Abdelhamid. Rana is an internationally acclaimed human rights organizer, first-degree black belt, public speaker, and social entrepreneur focused on the empowerment of marginalized communities. Rana established Malikah at 16 after being attacked by a stranger who tried to rip the hijab from her head. Malikah is a global collective of women committed to building safety and power for other women through healing, self-defense, economic empowerment, and leadership training. Today, I got to talk a little bit about SDG 5 and 10 with Rana, focused around reduced inequalities and gender equality. I am so delighted to welcome Rana Abdelhamid. We're here in New York City. And so, Rana, welcome to the show.
Thanks for coming to my city.
Yes,
this means a lot to me.
Yeah, it's currently raining right now, and so it has been a day, but we are so excited to welcome Rana. Well, I just wanted to ask you a few questions. We have an audience of young people who are watching across the world, and I'm running to bring on some change makers onto the show, people who've been there, done that, who've seen the trials, who've gone through hard work, and I immediately thought of you. Funny enough, Ron and I first met when I was a student at the Harvard Kennedy School's PPLC program. She was our keynote speaker, and ever since then, I followed her, and I've just been so inspired.
Oh, you're so kind. We all were so inspiring to me, honestly.
Yes.
And what you're doing right now.
Oh,
Youth ambassador.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous. But Rana, so I want to get to know, and I want them to get to know you a little bit more. So why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit more about who you are, where you're from, and
I can do that. I know where I'm from. All right, so my name is Rana. I was born and raised in Queens, New York, which is one of the most diverse places in the world. So Queens is known to be very linguistically and culturally, ethnically diverse. We have over 800 languages that are spoken there. And it's just a really beautiful place where there's a ton of working class immigrants who have like a vision for their families. And I think a lot of my upbringing instilled within me kind of my love for that diversity, my love for economic justice, my love and service for my community as I saw my community experience state violence at various levels. And so that leads me to who I am today, which is that I am a community organizer first and foremost. I do organizing work around gender justice primarily, economic justice, racial justice. And for the past 10 years, I've been running a nonprofit organization that trains women of color in self-defense, in healing justice, economic justice, and organizing. So how do we actually actualize change in our local communities?
Yeah, and that nonprofit that you run is amazing. I mean, I've never heard anything like it.
Thank you. That means so much.
You know, she travels around the world and she hosts self-defense classes for women. And so that idea in itself, it's unheard of. And so can you tell us how that started?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, I always talk about how I do this organizing work for a place of love, and I think that's really important to emphasize that, like, I do it because I believe that there could exist a world where all women are safe and all women are in their power. But unfortunately, the idea for this nonprofit came from a place where I was not feeling safe in my own skin. It was after when I was 16 years old, I experienced a hate-based attack. A man assaulted me in the street in Queens, unfortunately, trying to take off my hijab. And so this religiously based attack really kind of shook me, you know, especially as a young woman, especially as someone who loves her city, loves her community, loves her neighborhood. I felt unsafe walking down the streets. But at the time, you know, I was actually able to get out of that situation because I had been doing karate, Shotokan karate, since I was 7 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was like a competitive black belt, so this person didn't know what was coming. But also, there was an emotional outcome to that experience, right? Like, I was recognizing that emotionally I had been traumatized by this experience. And so literally just in search of my own healing process and my own healing, I started to gather girls in my neighborhood, and I would teach them not even self-defense, I would teach karate, and then we just kick it. Like, they were just my friends. We talk about the challenges that we face. And at the end of that summer, one of the young women, she was like, yo, we're not just getting here, right? Like, we got to keep this going. And so I started to train her. I trained her to bring this to her own community. And that's kind of the start of our Train the Trainer model, which is rooted in the work that we do, which allows us to reach the 20,000 women in 20 cities.
Wow.
Where we train women to bring our 4 core programs into their own neighborhoods.
Wow. That's amazing. When I read 20,000 women, I was just blown away.
Yeah.
Because I think about how every day, you know, growing up in Ypsilanti, I have sisters, and it's not the likely of... I love my community, but for women growing up there, it's not the safest of places. And just to know that there's a program that exists that can teach them not only self-defense, but if they have already been attacked, healing, you know, is just beautiful. And so there are other young people out there that are watching, and they're wondering how can they start a project, how can they, you know, start something, how can they start a movement. I want you to speak a little bit on, you know, how that journey was for you. Did you experience some times of difficulty? And what was that like?
Oh my God. Do I, like, literally right now, 5 minutes ago, did you not see, you were there. Yes.
Wow.
The answer is yes. There is a lot of difficulties. And I think, you know, the one thing that I say to folks who are interested, especially young people who are interested in doing community-based work, is to start with what you know. I say this all the time. I say start with what you know, start with who you know, and then start from a place of joy and start from a place of vision, right? Because we all have our skills. Like, my younger brother really loves music, and my other brother really loves to dance, right? And like, I don't do those things, but like, I could appreciate how you might use those as tools that might bring people together, right? And preserve our histories and elevate the narratives of people. And so, like, what are you really good at? And how can you use that to bring people onto their own healing journeys and to, like, mitigate some harm that exists? I think sometimes it feels like there's so many barriers, but you just have to really have the confidence to just start. Because when I first started, everyone was like, what are you trying to do? This is not the thing. Like, this is not the move. I think, and it came from a place of fear. Like, the Muslim community post 9/11 in New York, my neighborhood, my street, experienced a lot of NYPD surveillance, a lot of state-sanctioned violence. And so people were kind of needing to have their heads down. And I think coming from, as peoples who come from a colonial history, right, there's a lot of fear. Come from contact with police that's oftentimes brutal, there's a lot of fear. And so I think it's on our generation to recognize that and also to be able to overcome that through our own journeys.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point there, that it's our responsibility. And, you know, we sometimes look toward, I know my own personal story, I've always relied on governments and other people to handle issues that I witnessed myself, because I never really felt empowered to do it myself. And I felt like I needed a degree, and I felt like, you know, I needed to gather some experience, you know, working in the real world. And so what do you have to say to that person watching at home right now who's probably thinking that same thing, that's saying, well, I'm not as cool as Rana, or I'm not wherever Jaylen is, but I mean, like, I want to create change too. What would be your message to them?
I mean, just be start. Like, I mean, you would have never became the youth ambassador, right, if you hadn't applied, right? Like, you give yourself 0% chance that you would be accepted if you don't apply. Like, I gave myself 0% chance to be able to vision this world that I had, like, for a really long time longed to exist in, if I don't start. And I know I'm far from that world, right? I know, like, I know the rates of domestic violence. I know the rates of hate-based violence. In fact, I think like the rates of hate-based violence, given like the way reporting has been happening, is higher maybe now based on reporting than it was when I started.
Yeah.
So you could kind of throw your hands up in the air and be like, things are getting worse, like I don't even know why I'm doing this. Or you could just really be committed to that vision, which is why I think like starting and understanding what you're working towards and doing it from a place of joy is really important, because then you're not just reacting to the violence, even though that's really important. Like I think there's place for that, but cultivating from a place of like love for a people is a lot more sustainable, right?
Wow.
And so instead of holding that insecurity, instead of holding that fear, instead of being like, I don't know if I should do this, I don't know if I'm up for this, you're the expert in your own experience. You understand more than anyone what it is to be a young person, because you're a young person, right?
Yeah.
Just like I understand what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a woman of color, what it is to be a Muslim woman, and that's enough for me to be ready to do this work.
Wow.
That's all that matters.
That's amazing. That's enough.
It's true.
You are enough. I've always heard my mom say that. She's always like, you by yourself, you're enough.
1,000%.
And I think that's amazing. And so we're shifting gears here. This episode is towards SDG 5, gender equality and reducing inequalities, SDG number 10. And this is an important year for women and girls. I believe every year is, but this is important. Yeah, we have the anniversary of Beijing plus 25. And so what can I do? And I know that there are a lot of young men watching this. What can I do as a man to help champion this movement for women?
Yeah, y'all gotta heal. I feel like, you know, the people who are burdened by patriarchy aren't just women, right? I mean, obviously we experience violence at a much higher rate. We are oftentimes dismissed and erased from decision-making tables, right? And policy-making tables. But I think that every single person who's part of this equation, non-binary, male, woman, right? Man, woman, across the gender spectrum, like we all have our healing work to do. But I would emphasize that men should get together and should try to unpack and understand their own biases in a way that really interrogates, why do they hold these perspectives? And why are they perpetuating these forms of violence? Because we do it all the time, right? But unless we're really like authentically, not performatively, not like, oh great, I'm a social justice warrior, I tweeted this, right? But rather like, I feel really uncomfortable to sit with the fact that I'm sexist, even as a woman, right? Or like I'm really uncomfortable to sit with the fact that I have like anti-black biases, or I have like biases against X type of person because of the society that we live in. But I'm actually willing to do the work. I'm willing to read on my own. I'm willing to like sit down and reflect and do intentional exercises that will help me do less harm in the world that I exist in. That can happen in collective. So we have a curriculum that folks can use. They could download and they could actually have these conversations at a community-based level. You could also do it individually by reading and listening to women. And learning about people's perspectives and doing the work to educate yourself on your own.
Wow. So what I just heard is that Malikah has resources for men as well.
We do. We have masculinity. We have a masculinity project.
Yes. Okay, cool. And so that's good to hear, because I think that a lot of men leave it at, oh, I just need to stand there and just support without actively doing anything to go forth and, you know, to help this movement. And so that's good to hear, and that's good to know. My next question leans a little bit more toward your mental health. You do so much. And I'm telling y'all just Google her and you will understand what I mean. You do so much, and the work you do is so important, and the communities of people you've impacted has just been so great. We've watched interviews with you in it, and it's just been so cool. How do you take care of you? What does Rana do to, you know, just
replenish?
Just to replenish.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I know maybe this is a cop-out answer, right? But I really love what I do. Like, I don't feel that it is work.
Wow.
So that's one thing. But there are very intentional practices that I have integrated into my lifestyle, because, to be quite frank, a couple of years ago, I wasn't very good at this. Like, I did some healing justice work, with folks who are living in refugee camps in Jordan and came back diagnosed with secondhand trauma, because I was like sitting in these spaces, like leading psychosocial support groups, and really absorbing a lot of information. And as someone who, and I think a lot of activists, a lot of organizers, right, we sit right in our anger, which again, I think it's important to hold that anger. We sit in our pain, and we don't necessarily have the spaces because we think we have to be strong all the time.
Wow.
For the communities that we serve, for the communities that we're a part of, because we come from impacted communities. Like so like me doing this work isn't divorced from me, because these are this is my family, right? This is my community, these are my people. And so I think the way in which I take care of myself is I do things that celebrate the work that we do, the accomplishments, the joy of my community, and I do things that quote unquote fill my cup, right? Whatever it takes for my cup, I do. And that, me as a religious person, that looks like a lot of prayer, that looks like meditation, that looks like being in spiritual and religious circles. I'm also a martial artist, right? And athletics is really important to me, so I go to the gym and I box, right? Like these things that take care of my soul, that take care of my body, that take care of my spirit are important, and I think like we have to make time for them. And we can't be fooled by this capitalist system to think we constantly have to be producing, because we don't.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't. I just gotta drop that, and it's hard. It's hard to unlearn that, but we just gotta. We have to unlearn it.
Yeah, that's
like our survival. For me to be able to do this is dependent on that.
Wow.
Right?
No, like
what do you
that.
do for self-care? I want to know.
You're
like, I drank
music.
a Red Bull 3 hours ago.
No, I will not drink a Red Bull. If my dad is watching this, he's probably drinking a Red Bull. But I do a lot of music.
Good.
I play piano. I sing.
Ooh, good art.
Lots of prayer as well. I'm Christian, and so I'm always with my Bible study group, and it just helps me just stretch away sometimes from, especially since I'm still a student too. And so doing all of this, I'm in New York right now, but I had a midterm last night, right? So, I'm sure you don't miss that.
0% chance that
But you're so right. And I think that you brought up a good point about unlearning, and I think that that's a huge issue that we don't talk about as much when it comes to, how can we champion this movement for women, or how can we understand these things that probably feel a little uncomfortable to us, and it's that idea of unlearning is so hard. But I want to stretch into our last question, which is, the UN is calling this the Decade of Action. They've had this agenda where it's the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, and we are 10 years away. And so how will Rana use this decade of action? And so, just tell us, how will you use this decade of action to champion more change and impact more communities?
Yeah. So one of the things that I really, and I've worked with UN Women before, and I think, a lot of their work is really powerful. For me, thinking about kind of how to impact some of the issues that I deeply care about, it's about building capacity for communities across the globe, especially communities of women. So I will be successful, right? Like my metric is X amount of women are trained to facilitate self-defense, to facilitate healing justice, to facilitate community organizing and financial literacy trainings in their communities. And by that way, it's like one to few to many model, right? Like that's like a globally activated community that's driven by one vision, right? Which is, again, to build a world that is more safe and for women, and where all women can be in their power. And the issue that we're organizing around is the reality of the pervasiveness of the violence that women face. So 1 in 4 women will experience some form of gendered violence in her lifetime. And I always say this to my team, I'm like, I know that maybe that number won't be completely gone by the time maybe I'm done doing this work, but if we could get it to 1 in 5 women, 1 in 6 women, right? I'm like 1 in 10 women, I'd be real happy, right?
Wow.
And it's like, how do I actually impact these numbers with the incredible team of women that I'm working with, who are leaders in this work, to see that less violence. So that's the action. that I'm committed to
Wow.
for the next 10 years to hopefully get us to those 2030 goals.
Yes, and she's going to do it. So be on the
Inshallah.
lookout. Yes,
Inshallah.
be on the lookout for Rana. And so how can people stay connected with you? I know you have this nonprofit, but you guys just don't do these things. They don't just happen. They require support, and there's a lot of people watching that would want to be able to support Malikah or even you. So how can they keep in contact with you and your nonprofit?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a woman interested in getting involved, you're a man, or any, again, across the gender spectrum, if anyone's trying to get involved with our work, you could feel free to email us, and I'm sure you'll tag that information. Our website, our Instagram, I'm sure you'll tag that information too. You could also keep up with my work, like on the gram as well. And my last thing is, obviously, this work requires money, and so please fund grassroots organizations, because we're volunteer-led.
Wow.
And that money doesn't even go to our overhead costs. It directly goes into grassroots programming.
Wow.
And so, yeah, that's like a good way to support our, or if you want to be a partner, you want to whatever.
Yeah, someone needs to support this work, because over the next 10 years, they're looking for these goals to be met. And,
yeah, we got to meet those goals.
So we need partnerships all across the board.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Rana. It's been an honor. And we're loving New York City besides the rain. So thank you for hosting us.
Go to Queens, please. That was so fun. I love talking to you.
Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Of course. This is wonderful.